Even though you can't see us, we're always right here. Because we're the world's most transparent podcast, the Pod People. I'm John Cena.
I am the Hollow Man, or Mr. Translucent, or
AKA
the man made of glass,
AKA
the man that's very hard to see sometimes, especially in the dark.
Whoa, got it. Nailed it.
And I'm Ben Sheets,
Nailed it. Nice.
also known as that.
You are? Wow. Hi, I'm Cleveland Mosier, and hashtag not all invisible men.
I wasn't expecting that. Oh, fuck. Well, today we're coming at you with a double dose of horror. We'll be talking about the oldest film we've ever talked about on the podcast, and also the newest film we've ever talked about on the podcast.
Because it's current.
That's right.
Wow.
It's an invisible week here at the Pod People, and we're going to kick things off by talking about the original Invisible Man from 1933, directed by James Whale and starring Claude Rains, Gloria Stewart, and William Harrigan. And it is based upon the novella by H.G. Wells of the same title about a mad scientist who turns himself invisible and goes on a little killing spree.
So I was looking at the IMDb page for the new Invisible Man, and I thought you would pronounce the director's name wrong because it's Leigh Whannell.
Leigh Whannell.
And I thought you were saying Whale, like some weird pronunciation.
Yeah, James Whale.
This is Welsh. Whale.
You gotta slow-
Whannell, is the N silent? The double N?
You gotta slow your roll, Cleveland. We're not there yet. We're not there yet.
Yeah, we're starting in the past.
Yeah, we're gonna do a pretty short review of this one. It is, like we said, the oldest film we've talked about on the podcast so far, from 1933. James Whale is the legendary English Universal horror director who gave us Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, two of the greatest horror classics of all time. And The Invisible Man is maybe my favorite Universal monster film from this era.
It's a good pick.
It's definitely up there, yeah. It's the most science fiction-y of them, I would say.
I would need a little more time to stew on that just because I grew up on all the others but missed this one somehow. Because like my dad...
that's surprising. Out of all people, like, you're the one among us who should have seen this before, and it was me who had.
My dad made it a point to like ingrain all like the classic Universal like monster movies just into my head before really I was even old enough to, like, even then. One of my first memories is like seeing King Kong, the original, when I was way too young. And the shot of its face close up that like was like a giant studio head. I won't get into it, but anyway.
I think you've talked about that on the show before.
But anyway, I love those films, but somehow this one slipped through the cracks.
And this is my favorite. Invisible Man might also be my favorite H.G. Wells story. It's a tough one because all the ones I've read are fucking bangers.
Yeah, War of the Worlds is definitely mine.
War of the Worlds is great.
But
The Time Machine is great.
Pick.
There's something about The Invisible Man that I love so much because it feels more like a character study than anything else.
And it is our universal like favorite story arc too. I think like the Descent into Madness is something that, you know, like we can all agree with. We wrote like our high school story about like a descent into madness. It's like mad scientists are kind of things we love to bits.
True that.
So I definitely hear that. I think Dracula is probably my favorite. I love Bela Lugosi's performance in that so much.
I would say the OG Frankenstein is actually my favorite.
That's a really fun
Karloff.
one.
There's so many good ones, though. This one in particular was really interesting because it was in the couple-year period before the Hays Code. It really didn't cut corners in what it showed.
It's very worth bringing up.
The stuff they were able to get away with, like for a 1930s film, there's some very surprising things that you would not expect to see
at all. And the pacing is really fun. I'd recommend it, even if like you're generally not a fan of like those old classics.
It's very fun.
Yeah, it's fun. It's macabre, and it's a joy to laugh with. I think.
The effects are absolutely incredible too,
So good.
especially for the time it was made.
Surprisingly,
The
like
masking looks great.
I remember the first time I saw it in college being like, how the fuck did they pull off these effects in 1933? The part at the beginning when he's like first going on his initial rampage and he's like taking off his bandages and all of his clothes and like just like a pair of pants running around. It's really good.
Yeah, it looks great.
Like a lot of that, like you can kind of see some of the masking a little bit at times, but most of the time, like it still holds up incredibly well.
Because we're watching like an HD version of it too.
Yeah.
Like which normally would put all the bad qualities on full blast. You'd
Yeah.
see like all the tracing and everything more clearly. But here it was clean as hell. There are like A-budget movies in like the 80s and 90s that have worse like tracing or masking than, than that film.
absolutely.
Like
Yeah.
it was meticulously done.
I would say that The Invisible Man has better effects than Event Horizon.
Oh, poor Event Horizon.
Poor Event
That'd be
Horizon.
too mean to Event Horizon now.
I think we'll do Event Horizon on the podcast at some point. I think it would be fun.
I think it would be an event.
But
Horizon.
what I really like about this film too is the pacing, because it's only 71 minutes, so it's just over an hour. It's extremely short, and they don't dick around at all. Like, it is just very tight, fast-paced, fun the whole time. Totally.
Has nothing to do with the story.
That's not true.
I mean, okay, it does, but fuck, I didn't have a chance to read it again.
It has the same basic structure. The Invisible Man shows up at this like little inn in some small town in England. He's trying to discover a cure in solitude. He gets made by the locals and decides to go on a killing spree. He goes back to his old partner and tries to convince him to help him on a reign of terror. So
Manipulatively like ropes him in.
right, so he can rule the world through
An invisible man could rule the invisible world with invisible power. Ah!
and then there's like a big police hunt. So like structure wise, it's pretty much identical.
So all those same events occur in the book? Okay.
Yeah.
The other for me, it was a very long time ago when I read
as far as
it.
as far as I can recall, the biggest difference is there was another like kind of sidekick character that he recruited to sort of like help him with his megalomaniacal plan, who is actually like kind of into it.
Interesting. You know, I'm remembering the book entirely wrong. I had thought that the majority of the story was his discovery of
No.
Oh wow. Okay. Well,
No, now he's already invisible when the story starts.
shit. All right. Well, I definitely need to revisit that one. It's
But while I would
overdue.
say that like
It's probably 8th grade when I read it.
the novella is like pretty legitimately like quite dramatic and like has like a real touch of tragedy sort of about the
It has
character.
very serious tones.
It's tonally very serious, and this movie is extremely goofy.
yes.
Yeah, it almost feels
goofiest.
like a showcase for cool special effects.
It
Oh,
does,
it just is.
They
In
cut to
many
the
ways.
chase. It's pretty light on exposition. You know, you get enough story to keep you invested. but-
Every type of trick that they could think of pulling off, they had an excuse to try.
Yeah.
Like, if someone's getting bopped in the head with, like, cutlery, that's going to happen. Things are going to get picked up. The whole 9 yards. We can go on. There's no reason to go on about it. Go see it for yourself. It's great.
Yeah, there's a lot of like Three Stooges style like
Yes, well
comedy
said.
bits.
Yeah. A lot of physical comedy.
Yeah, Claude Rains is the Invisible Man, and he's great. He does a fantastic performance for somebody who is invisible. You don't even actually see his face until the very end when he dies.
And it, like, the tone is all over the goddamn place, too, because, like, even as campy as he is, like, Claude Rains makes some very serious threats
Oh, yeah.
during that movie, where it's just like, yes, and then I'll cut you up into tiny pieces and, you know, like, slit your throat while you're sleeping. Ah, I'm crazy. And then he goes back into, like, goofy shenanigans. And it's just, like, just total disparity. I love it. I love it
Yeah,
for that,
it's great.
honestly.
Do y'all want to rate this one quickly and then move on?
Yes.
Oh, 5 stars. Loved it.
Yeah, 4.5 for me.
It's
I
a
love
4
it.
for me. It's a really fun movie. It's worth checking out, especially in terms of the older ones.
If you're a fan of that stuff.
One aside I want to mention before we move on. The Invisible Man subgenre is very much a thing. There's tons of,
Yes.
adjacent movies, but one I wanted to quickly mention is Memories of an Invisible Man, directed by John Carpenter from 1992.
Never seen
Where
that one.
Chevy Chase is the Invisible Man.
What? That exists?
It's like a weird comedy. It's not good. It's not good at all. It's such a bizarre movie, though. It has Daryl Hannah and Stephen Tobolowsky and Michael McKean and who else is in that one?
Amazing.
Sam Neill is in that. But it's a bizarre movie. I just wanted to mention, like, they've done so many Invisible Man movies that it's almost its own subgenre at this point.
And, you know, like, The Invisible Man was a big part of The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. We won't talk about that film too much. Then
Why not? It's great.
There was Hollow Man by Verhoeven, starring Kevin Bacon, which I've never seen. But, yeah, like, The Invisible Man, much like all of the other Universal monster movies, is, like, part of the horror canon. And, by the way, average of 4.5 out of 5 for the original one, based on our reviews. Can't forget that.
Nice.
But, yeah, so let's use that as a segue to move into the brand new Invisible Man from this year, 2020. As you mentioned, Cleveland, directed by Lee Wanell, writer of the original Saw, and also writer and director of Upgrade, which we've talked about on the podcast before, a film that we all really enjoyed. This movie stars Elizabeth Moss, Oliver Jackson Cohen, Harriet Dyer, and Aldous Hodge, and holy shit, this movie vastly exceeded my expectations.
The reason I brought up the subgenre thing is it plays a good segue into this movie and my feelings on it.
Yes.
There's a reason the Invisible Man subgenre died out, because a lot of these movies were trash.
Yeah.
Memories of Invisible Man was trash. Hollow Man was trash. It's an inherently campy premise, and it's hard to nail a movie with a campy premise without being too goofy. And I think this is one of the biggest hallmarks of this movie is it takes a premise that is very campy
and rule the invisible world.
It turns it on its head and takes it very seriously and does it in a way that's very authentic and very current, which is so hard to do. And I respect it so much for that.
It's a fantastic reimagining of the story and modernization as well.
Yes.
We talked about that a little bit when we covered the Child's Play reboot, how that felt like something very current for like the source material, and this movie does the same thing. We talked a little bit about our thoughts when we did our predictions based on the trailer, and the trailer, I thought, was actually pretty misleading. It looked fun and it looked campy, which, like you said, is kind of the tone of this particular subgenre of horror, and I was shocked and pleasantly surprised at how legitimately tense this movie was. How often I found myself on like the edge of my seat, and a few times where I like gasped involuntarily. Not at all what I was expecting.
Yeah, and every subversion caught me by surprise.
Yeah.
I was rarely like ahead of the plot. There were several times where I thought I was. I appreciate the hell out of that. I think before we can really talk about why, I mean, spoiler warnings, right? It's really not worth having spoiled for you. Go see it if you can in theaters. It's a delight.
It's brand new. Yeah, I would check it out. We got to see it in Dolby, and it was
recommended if you have an AMC near you. Like, holy shit.
What I wanted to mention is the trailer did make it look very campy, you know, and I was a bit nervous going into it because of that, because, you know, the subject matter is serious. You know, an abusive relationship is something that is hard to nail when you're joking about, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to say it's not doable, but it's fucking hard to do.
It's a sore subject.
Yeah.
And I don't
right now.
And I'm so glad that it was handled with maturity. You know, there are some, you know, bigger moments in this movie, but they didn't feel unwarranted or undeserved.
Yeah.
You know, there's flourishes in this movie of the Upgrade Leigh Whannell.
Yeah,
you
totally.
know?
Some of the same camera tricks and stuff.
But this movie felt like so much more mature than Upgrade. It's like night and day.
Yeah.
And obviously they're different movies. You know, you have to take different approaches with them. But I really respect it for that.
Same.
Yeah,
I agree. It really shows like Leigh Whannell's range.
And I would definitely agree seeing it in Dolby. We're lucky to have a Dolby theater in Durham. It's my like go-to theater experience, like best screen and best sound system.
Yeah.
And this
in the
film
area.
is so reliant on sound.
Yes.
The audio and the sound design plays such a crucial role in the horror and in the tension, because like that's like audio becomes for a large portion of the movie the only means you have of identifying like where the man is.
Your
what's
villain
going
is
on.
invisible, so being able to hear things is very important, and there's a lot of the movie that is silent, or rather devoid of music, and I thought that was a really good choice. The score is done by Benjamin Wallfish, who did Blade
Runner 2049.
Yeah, along with Hans Zimmer.
Do you know if he did the Upgrade soundtrack?
I'm pretty sure he did. Yeah,
That
I
would
think
make
so.
sense. You know, some of the same textures.
This movie, like, while it is very different from Upgrade, Lee Wanell as a director, has like a very distinct style.
Well, and he has his taste, you know?
Yeah.
You have the same kind of futurist architecture as Upgrade in a lot of ways, especially with the house.
That's what I liked so much about this modernization, is that the original story was and is science fiction, but science fiction for a different era, you know, like he becomes invisible through like experimenting with like chemicals and like injecting himself with shit.
Which of course drives him mad because he is a mad scientist.
Right, yeah, the chemicals drive him insane, you know. So
Spooky drug potions.
and while that, you know, is cool conceptually for like a modern film, it doesn't feel quite appropriate, I don't think. And the way that they modernized and updated that in this movie was remarkable, I thought.
I went into this film under the belief that you would not be able to have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
I went into this film thinking you could either, and I didn't see the trailer. I even played during the previous film that we saw, and I like closed my eyes and like hummed. I didn't want to see anything going into this movie. I wanted it to be invisible. But anyway, I was delightfully proven wrong. They were able to give us something that both had like the dark sociopath, mad scientist sort of vibe. We got that feeling. We got some really cool like invisible action in this movie, and we also get some very legitimate commentary that's done with such class. It's pretty tasteful considering like how horrifying the subject matter is. And I think one of the things that makes it so tasteful is they did their homework. God.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit in terms of scope, because the original story, the Invisible Man, as I mentioned, his goal after he's driven mad by these chemicals is world domination. Mm-hmm. He wants to institute in his words, a reign of terror,
or in this case, a Claude reign of terror.
A Claude reigns of terror, where he's throwing the nation into a state of panic by killing random people, making them feel that nobody is safe from the Invisible Man, you know, whereas this is a much different focus. The Invisible Man, Adrian, is a narcissistic sociopath, and his entire goal is to essentially punish Elizabeth Moss for leaving him and gaslight her. This is the second week in a row that we're talking about like a film that is heavily...
It is the season of the gaslight.
Season of the gaslight. And I think that is such a good idea. Like, not only does it make the themes like relatable and horrifying, but also like world domination isn't. It's so overplayed. It's such like that's a Marvel villain
cute.
kind of thing.
Like when you see like the old one when he talks about like world domination. Well, also like even like within the context of the original, like it's more sad even at that point, because you know that like he's lost his mind to the degree where he even believes that as an invisible man he can control the world.
Well, yeah,
because he's already gone full bonkers at that point.
In the novella, like what makes the ending so sad is that like he gets eventually cornered by a bunch of townspeople and they like beat him to death, and as before he dies he's like begging for his life and for mercy, and like it really paints a picture of somebody who has, you know, been driven mad by his own experiments, somebody who is mentally unwell, whereas in this movie like he is a cold, calculating, brilliant sociopath.
Well, If anything, I have to say I'm glad that The Mummy failed, because this was originally going to be one of the Dark Pictures.
Oh, the Universal Dark Universe, yeah.
And I think
Johnny Depp was supposed to be the Invisible Man originally. Can you imagine?
I think if The Mummy was successful, this would have been a much different movie, and it probably would have been world domination.
Yeah.
You know, I'm so glad that they took a step back after that and realized, hey, let's think about this more, put more thought into this, and let someone do their own creative vision.
I don't think Lee Whannell was even attached to the Invisible Man until after The Mummy failed and they kind of killed the Dark Universe. And fuck, man, am I so glad that happened. I don't want a fucking Universal monster movie cinematic universe.
It's still kind of set up for it. That's what I love.
No. we never saw Dr. Jekyll show up to recruit the Invisible Man.
We didn't stay until after
but she
the
has
credits.
a suit. She has a suit. Like, and you know, she gets that look and that smile like, oh, hey, maybe I'm a sociopath too now. Which I like. I like that they keep it ambiguous because I don't necessarily like that. Like, I'd much rather her like go on to just not be a victim or whatever. Like, that's great.
I like the ending. I hope there's not a sequel to this movie. I hope they don't continue this.
Big same.
I think that it is very well self-contained. I think that it ends poetically and wonderfully, and just let that be it.
I will say though, if they do it, I'll still gladly go see it, even if it is campy garbage, and won't feel too bad about it. I'm saying that hindsight's 2020 and open to being extremely wrong.
Yeah, we're recording this.
I would. Well, this is why I'm putting the preface on it. But because I love the effects so much, I want to see more. You know, like if it has to go a campy route or whatever, I'd be okay with it.
I don't know if I'd be okay with that, because this movie is so mature, so thoughtful.
You'd have to separate the two.
Yeah.
That you can't do a direct sequel and make it campy. I don't know if that would really work.
There's so little that's actually campy in this movie. I think I laughed once the entire time.
What was that one bit? Because like the audience laughed. There was a part in the movie.
I've already forgotten what made me laugh, honestly.
There was a moment earlier in the movie where she first says to Adrian's brother that she thinks there's an invisible man, that had people chuckle a little bit.
Oh yeah.
I don't even think it was that funny.
That was not the part that made me laugh. Like it does a great job of like making her sound crazy, which I think her story,
meticulously trying to do that. Like it was all with intent.
It's fucking gaslighting. Mm-hmm. It is like tormenting somebody with the intent of making them doubt their own sanity and making others doubt their sanity. And it's done so fucking well.
Yeah. In some ways, it almost reminds me of the approach that the original Candyman takes, in that like there's that ambiguity to the outside world of whether the main character is doing this or if it's an exterior force.
No, I was going to bring up Candyman as well.
What's so great about that is, and I was thinking about this during like the first act, is this film, like it spares no fat with the intro, which was perfect. Like the intro, start is ace.
The intro is incredible. Like
there's so much tension.
Yes. That's when I knew that like we were in for something that I was not expecting. The whole like first 10 or so minutes of the movie is like her running away from Adrian.
It's set up like a prison escape sequence.
Is.
Yeah. Well, because it is.
Yeah.
And
she's like executing her escape plan from his like crazy high-tech mansion on the coast that in such a way that was just like so insanely tense with no setup, but we get everything we need from it, you know?
Yeah.
Everything.
And here's what's even better. Like that trend continues to carry on as we move into like the meat of the first act, where we as an audience, we know there's an invisible man. The movie's called Invisible Man. We bought our tickets. We're sitting in the seats.
Right.
Like we're aware we're watching this movie. And any other film would go through the whole first act with this like, is it or is it not bit, where the character, we have to watch the character like figure it out in real time. But the beauty of this bit, of the way that this film handled it, is because she is already paranoid, she is already primed.
Right.
And she's believably paranoid. She does things that like people who have been like abuse victims would do. fucking chef's kiss for that. So it allows us to get straight to the tension.
Like you said too, like it primes her story to be unbelievable, even to like her loved ones, to like her sister and her friend who she's staying with. Like they know how damaged she is from this experience. So when she starts like having a breakdown because she realizes that Adrian is not dead, that he's alive, and he has found a way to make himself invisible and is tormenting her, of course nobody's gonna believe it. It's a far-fetched premise as it is, but she's traumatized. She has PTSD. And honestly, one of my few complaints with the movie, and it's a overall relatively minor complaint, is when she actually gives the exposition of how he abused her. I didn't think it was necessary. I think the opening bit, like her fear and her terror, says everything it needs to. I don't think we needed that detail.
I think that like your average audiences did, and what I'll say about that sequence, I fully agree with you.
Like it's not terrible.
It felt like something that like maybe like was executively like, hey, look, we need to make this a little bit more clear for modern audiences. But with that big assumption in mind, like it was well done regardless. Like her acting during that scene is quite like emotive and powerful.
I actually didn't mind it. I thought more was said in what she didn't say than what she said.
And if it gives additional content.
That's kind of my point, though, is like there's so much more in what isn't said, so I don't think you need to say anything.
It's not necessary, but I do enjoy what it gave us additionally with like, because her talking about how much he was in her head with her thoughts.
I think even,
I enjoyed that.
What she's able to share says a lot about, her internal experience and the trauma and how it affects her directly, and it kind of builds her character in a weird way. I actually thought it was kind of necessary.
It just gives us an opportunity to relate with her in dialogue and allow Elizabeth Moss to
so much of the movie is so subjective to her view.
Sure.
That alone builds, some of that perspective in how she views the situation, on how she can externalize some of it, but not all of it. I thought it was really well handled.
Perfectly.
I think all of the subjectivity of the film was excellently handled.
I will agree with that.
She felt like she was a legitimate trauma victim.
I guess what my problem really comes down to is I think Leigh Whannell is a good writer. I don't think he's a great dialogue writer. That was one of my problems with Upgrade too, that some of the dialogue feels unnatural, and it has less to do with the performance and more of just like, I don't feel like that's necessarily what people say. It's a nitpick because I loved this movie and I thought that like structurally it's so well written.
But it's important to look for those things. So we can talk about them. I think it's the point of the podcast.
I just think that Leigh Whannell like could do with some tightening up of his dialogue. I mean, look, he look at like the first Saw, and I mean that was like almost 20 years ago at this point. Yeah. But like the dialogue in the first Saw is fucking terrible.
It's very ham-fisted.
It's bad, and I think that he is getting. I think he's getting better, but just like at that point when she's sitting at the table with James and her sister, and just like explaining this stuff, it's like, okay, fine, sure, but I felt like I got so much of that context just from that opening scene and the way that she behaves. I think that speaks so much more poignantly than her saying like he was abusive and he hit me and he got in my head and stuff like that. That's a matter of personal taste though.
Because like that spooked me out a little bit too. Like they asked like, did he hit you? And she says among other things. And I was like, ugh, that made my stomach turn.
I will say the one part that I thought was actually quite good was when she's saying how she was sitting in his house one time like thinking about how to escape, and he was just like staring at her, and without her saying anything he said, "You'll never be able to leave me." That's like the one exception I'll make. I thought that was excellent.
I thought the whole bit of him wanting to control her thoughts was really disturbing. I thought that was an interesting thing to mention too. because it really shows the depth of the abuse that she was.
And I mean, he kind of is doing that throughout the movie.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
controlling her thoughts.
Everything about his character like says meticulousness.
Yeah.
You know, like he's very careful about all those things.
He's a scientist.
And a sociopath. And they really nailed the sociopathy and didn't just do like, you know, like the textbook like basics for it. And I appreciate that. To carry on that subject too, like this film utilizes that concept of invisibility very well from a point of commentary as well. She is treated as an invisible person.
Yeah.
Like by not being heard. And when it comes to doing that sort of thing in a film that is so conceptually goofy, you know, like it's about a mad scientist, you know, like who turns invisible. It's one of the wackiest ideas you can have. To pull off that kind of commentary is not easy to do. And I want to bring up one of the ways right off the bat they do it so well. First off, you're gearing yourselves towards a demographic that is largely turned off by a lot of that kind of stuff right now. We have a lot of Hollywood films that, you know, insert that kind of commentary for the sake of doing it and not with any like real quality, with any real ability. And so it's a hand wave. This movie, one of the things it does so well is it doesn't make an enemy out of like all men or anything like that. The first male character that we really get to see, because we don't really see Jack during that scene. They do a good job of like hiding his face in the shadow. Adrian, sorry. Was his last name Jack?
No, Adrian Griffin.
Oh, Oliver Jacks is the actor's name. Okay, that's what it was. Yeah, Adrian Griffin. We only see his face in shadow. The first man that we see is James.
Yeah.
Who's a good person. James's character, I think, is one of the focal like aspects that legitimize a lot of the commentary. It's why I kind of picked that intro bit, you know, as a joke there as
not
well.
Not all invisible men.
Yeah, hashtag not all invisible men. Shut the fuck up. This is an important topic to talk about, and it's not necessarily talking about you, right? Like it's not all men, but it's talking about abusive men. And this character is an abusive man. And by giving us an example of a good man as well, fucking hats off. Like, and we can all sit back and enjoy like that without feeling no one feels no one's being attacked. It feels
poignant without feeling preachy.
Right, exactly.
It's definitely a feminist movie without being a girl boss movie. You know, it's
actually feminist.
It's not the perfection.
Yeah. I mean, forgive a straight white man like telling you what it is, but
I don't think this movie actually passes the Bechdel test. She's always talking about a man.
Hey, they talk about Parsons a little bit.
That's true. They talk about Colin. Okay. Bad joke. But yeah, I agree with you though. Like it feels like it has important commentary without like attacking anybody or rubbing anybody's face in anything.
And to be fair too, like I don't think that was necessary. I think it was necessary to win over like every demographic, but they didn't have to. They could have also just made it out like this man bad and not given an example, and that would have been fine too. I think it's important to say that. Like
well,
I don't want to be an apologist.
I would say look at the way they handle this film in contrast to a movie like The Perfection.
Like I was saying earlier. Yeah, exactly.
The reason I'm only saying that is I don't want to come across like a men's rights apologist or anything. Like Jesus Christ.
It's not a cheap girl boss movie in that like it feels like unearned female empowerment. It is like a legit feminist movie in a lot of ways. In a way that feels deserved and authentic. And I think, you know, one thing I want to talk about even more is how great Elizabeth Moss's performance in this is.
Nailed it.
I think that's what really sells a lot of it and really pushes it over the line in a good way. It makes it feel all the more real and all the more authentic and in the end all the more earned for the themes it's trying to convey.
And here's the beautiful thing about that, or one of the things that I found especially beautiful, is the one thing I would have wanted to see, if you're going to replace the mad scientist invisibility serum, I would still want to see the descent into madness. And the beautiful thing about it is we still get that, but it's with her character.
Right, it's her descent into madness.
Exactly.
Yeah,
we still
his.
get a descent into madness with this film. It gives us everything.
That's the thing, is like
that I would have wanted.
The Invisible Man is not the protagonist of this film. Like,
it's not an anti-hero story for once, which was so nice.
That's what's like I think really interesting and well executed about this film, is that his presence is felt constantly, but he doesn't really talk at all, except that like he has a couple lines at the very beginning and then a handful more at the very end. But he's always silent. He's unseen. It's like everything hinges entirely upon Elizabeth Moss's performance.
And in addition, I do want to say they do a great job compositionally shooting empty space throughout this movie in a really excellent way. Even when people are talking, they'll rack focus to put focus on a corner or something like that.
There's a lot of angles of like peeking out from like behind a wall, so it's like it gives that kind of voyeuristic quality.
It recontextualizes scenes.
Yeah. But without being like the trope of looking through the eyes of the killer, like it never feels like that. It always just like the cinematography is used in such a way to feel like you are spying on the characters, but not that you are seeing literally through the eyes of the villain.
To the point where halfway through the film, I was worried it was going to go in the direction of like she was actually going mad. Like,
well, that's one thing I wanted to talk about.
Wouldn't that be the worst twist?
Because, you were mentioning that this was a descent into madness of some sorts for Elizabeth Moss. I would contend that she is a rational actor throughout the whole thing, and it's externalized as madness.
Well, it's a descent into madness that's led by gaslight. It's not the same type of madness. It's not that Hollywood like wacky insanity.
She's even acting rational through it. It's that people perceive her actions as mad.
Yeah, as an invisible person. Like
I think that's a really poignant point, especially in a Me Too era, where these people that accuse others of doing awful, terrible, unspeakable things can just be called crazy or vindictive or out to get clout or fame.
They're erased. They are made invisible.
Yeah, and I think it's really, really smart.
I could not agree more.
I think what I mean by that is like we still get a descent in that like by a certain point when she's brought to like the mental institution, there's even self-doubt from her for a moment. For just a second, we're kind of brought to wonder maybe she is. And maybe like she, or at least I was thinking like, the film could go in a direction where like she was responsible still for those things.
There are a couple of times, especially towards the very end of the film,
because it was very Fight Club-esque, the way that they were setting those things up.
I felt gaslit by the movie.
Yeah, exactly. Like it takes you there. That descent is I guess what I'm really trying to get my finger under. But you're absolutely right, Ben. She stays like relatively steadfast. She only wavers for like a moment, before like maintaining her convictions. And we get that descent, and then we get to come back up out of the valley with her and like see her like fucking take charge at the end of it. Fuck yeah. Like,
well, I think that you could argue for a fair amount of ambiguity at the end. I like that it doesn't explicitly say certain things. I'll hold off on that before we get into the very end, because there's a couple other things I want to talk about.
Yeah, because we still haven't spoiled the big thing.
No, but before we do, we've been sort of dancing around
it's time.
The actual source of his invisibility, which, unlike the original story, as a serum, he has created a fucking like Ninja Gaiden suit that turns him invisible.
As the designer on the podcast, I'm gonna throw out my opinion and say it was dope.
It's fucking cool.
Yeah,
it's the coolest fucking thing. I loved it. Perfect. 10 out of 10 on design. It's just covered in eyes. Like, it's so spooky.
Well, yeah, because they're all cameras. You get the impression that like the way it works is that it's using the video of what is like
behind
on the other
it.
side
Like the
of
cameras
him
are moving and projecting
it
like
on the front.
The clicking noises, and you hear it at the very beginning, like when she's leaving, when she walks by the lab room, you hear that like clicking noise. So that means like it was like observing her when it was walking by automatically, which is so fucking cool. Like
suit
looking
was great.
back.
Yeah.
But you know what it reminded me of too is like the clicking sound like that the Predator makes.
A little bit,
You
yeah.
know?
I mean,
because like the Predator plays with invisibility.
This movie has fucking shades of Predator all over it.
Yes, it does in so many good ways.
Yeah, in like the best ways.
Yeah, which considering like the last Predator film that came out, like thank God.
Like one of the like inherently goofy things about the premise of the original is that like it
He's
makes him
naked all the
Right, it
time.
makes him invisible.
He's a nudie boy
but
running
his
around.
clothes are still and it like if he eats, like you can see the food like in his stomach and stuff like that. It's kind of goofy, just like the idea of this man running around with his dick and balls
that he
out.
can't rob a bank until he takes a shit.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Like,
Before they revealed the suit itself, there were like a few times where I was like wondering if it was almost like inconsistencies, like continuity stuff, because I thought
foreshadowed really well too, because there's so much tech in the mansion.
I of course assumed that it was some kind of like invisibility serum. And there's like the part at the beginning where she's like cooking and she like kind of, as she walks away, like the knife is like pulled off of the counter, and then like the gas gets turned up and the fire is set. But I'm like, where's the knife? The knife got pulled off, but where did it go? It's like, oh, because he put it in his suit. Mm-hmm. And
he didn't put it in his butt.
no, well, that's what I was thinking. It's like, where did the knife go? Did he put it in his butt?
How?
Well, it's like, and there's the part where you see, you like kind of hear him sit down and you see like the indentation in the chair. And I was just thinking, it's like, man, I hope he's not sweaty or it's going to leave like an imprint of like sweaty balls behind in that leather chair, which would have been infinitely less intimidating and infinitely more hilarious. And you know, once again, it's a fucking modern film. It's 2020, you know? So like, and they live in San Francisco too, of all places, like the technological hub of America. So like, I think it was smart to do it as
Silicon Valley
as a suit. Yeah.
Well, and the best part about it too is like I'm so goddamn tired of the Marvel movies, and I grew up loving like superhero movies. So to see like a tech suit again in a film with good writing and commentary is all I've been fucking asking for. So it was great, and essentially this character is evil Tony Stark.
Kind of, yeah.
And, you know, he's got, his house looks a lot like Tony Stark's. His lab area is like, it's very minimal, like a garage, and he's got like the other like suits set up. That was by intention.
Sure,
like it looks
probably.
like the same lab that like Tony Stark built his Iron Man suit. It's like roughly the same size, and like all the concrete walls, and it's all like cool, but it's on the California coast.
It's mod, yeah.
Like, yeah, it's they're playing off that idea. I love that. Like seeing like this sort of this subversion of Tony Stark.
I definitely saw the upgrade comparisons
Same.
with that, you know,
Yeah.
with the high-tech stuff influencing the approach of the film in a really interesting way. I thought that stuff was a great modernization. One thing I want to talk about a little bit is the subplot of Adrian really wanting a baby.
Oh yeah.
You know, early on in the film, she in the speech where she was explaining what happened to her, she actually mentioned that he was trying to have a baby, and she knew she would be stuck in the relationship if that came to be.
Yeah.
So she was,
Which is very real for a lot of people.
taking birth control.
I agree. That's actually like the one part of that scene that I do think like that exposition is very crucial because it comes back around at the end. I mean, it's ultimately why he doesn't kill her when he has many opportunities to.
He never wants to.
You know, and
because his goal is to bring her back.
Right. Well, and it's revealed that she is indeed pregnant later on in the movie. And
Yeah.
that he knew she was taking birth control and switched her pills with something else.
the thing is too, I remember that being said immediately, and it gave like a really unnerving edge to the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
And then even though that was fresh in my mind throughout, I was still unnerved and surprised
It gave
when it
everything
came,
an
yeah.
extremely like rapey subtext.
Yeah, big
Yes.
trigger warning on that. Yikes. This
Even though he never does
Which-
in the movie that we see.
No, and
but-
I appreciate too like that information is revealed during the mental institution sequence where time becomes very blurry. And so we do not know when any like conception occurred or anything like that. So we don't really have context over it. And I appreciate that ambiguity. And I think that's all that was needed.
I
to be
feel
done.
like it was fair. Maybe this is just my interpretation, but I feel like it was clear that it was
Yeah.
after he had died.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, they said month or two, so like the
No, he
assumption
said
is-
Within a month, and the events of this take place 2 weeks after she escaped. So I read it as it would have happened before he quote unquote died.
yeah.
Well, I figured that she had been staying there for weeks until.
Oh, I didn't get that impression.
No,
at
I think they were
all.
very ambiguous with time because she was being drugged and doped. So that's probably why it felt like so dilated.
Well, the other thing I wanted to mention about that is immediately after she had mentioned that in the speech she gave about what happened to her, I was nervous that he was going to be naked throughout.
Yeah, right.
You know, and I felt like that was going to inevitably be a Chekhov's gun.
Chekhov's rape.
Yeah, well, it really gave such a sinister feel to the stalking that happens in the movie
totally.
because you feel like she might actually get raped or sexually abused. While they're not too explicit with that stuff, I think to the movie's benefit.
Yeah, no, like it shone a spotlight on it from a distance.
It adds
and
an
that's how you do
extra
it.
it adds an extra layer of menace without ever actually going there to the point of gratuity. I think it's like just the right level of like really like setting the stakes and like the creepiness, but thank God we didn't get an invisible rape.
Because what's
I
what's
didn't want
the
that.
no one does, and like it's already so overdone with like showing that the villain is a villain because they're rapey. We didn't need it. You know, like they didn't need to put it any more out there than they did.
Yeah.
Like it's done. It's hackney, and also it's usually utilized for the wrong reasons. And here it provided commentary, and it was softly said, you know, but still like confidently said, and I appreciate that.
I think the moment she learns she's pregnant is like the true breaking point for her as a character.
Yeah.
In a really interesting way. Right after we get the reveal that, you know, the brother Tom, who's, you know, controlling the estate, is also in on it.
Dun dun dun.
And
I love the bait and switch. I love this.
I did call that, not outwardly, but like
Yeah, you should have leaned over and said something.
I should have. That is, I would say that a lot of the twists caught me by surprise, except that one. The brother is so like outwardly menacing. I'm like, I bet he's in on it.
Yeah, well, he's definitely like outwardly menacing, and he looks like a pawn in this scenario, which is great because it harkens back to the original one. This movie does delightfully like pay homage. Sydney wants to go into modeling school, so they have this wonderful excuse to have a mannequin in her house.
Yeah.
They do like kind of a fun like play with that, and of course like the brother represents like that same manipulated character, but we see him from a different perspective.
I also think that
and he's better well written.
I think that Adrian's house, I think his address is 1933. I might have missed that.
Oh, wouldn't
I
that be
might be
something,
making that
though?
up, but I think his address is 1933.
Wouldn't that be just a treat?
the whole segment of the you know, reveal of the brother being in on it, it felt like it was almost paying homage to Rosemary's Baby. The multiple people being in on wanting the seed.
I didn't make
to-
that connection, but that's a great point. Yeah.
And it has that same sort of menace of being forced into spawning this child against your will. And it's really horrifying, but it's done with such class and such nuance. That it doesn't feel over the top or hokey, really.
Yeah.
And I love it too, because like after he gets up during that sequence, we have her looking at the couch behind him, thinking like, oh, what if he's there? And then when the brother is there, the invisible man is killed, and we see the reveal where it's the brother. I was immediately sold on it. I was just thinking like, oh shit, what a great subversion. He did actually commit suicide, and it was the brother all along. And then shortly after that, it's also revealed that he is still alive.
Well, yeah, that he's still alive, but I think that
But leading up to that sequence, like just during that initial epiphany, I thought, oh, wow, we've just been looking at empty spaces in the room the whole time. Cool. And if the credits had rolled there, honestly, I would have been fine. But what they did beyond that is even better.
Well, what I love, why I think that even though I did kind of see it coming, that I think it's a pretty successful bait and switch, is because like at one point they make the brother seem like he's also a victim
Yes.
of Adrian. Like when she goes to him and like says he's invisible and he's still alive, and he's like, look, I get it. Like he controlled me for my entire life.
I have also been haunted.
And I was relieved when he died. And like but like, it's such a brilliant plan. The whole point of giving her the money, the estate, was so that he could frame her for murder, threaten to take it away, and then say, but if you carry the baby to term, then we'll make all this go away. You'll get to go back with Adrian. You'll be rich. You'll live the life. It's like the whole point of even like faking his death and giving her the money in the first place was all so he could get her back.
Yes.
And like it's such like a well executed, like devious layered scheme.
Much better than anything Jigsaw would come up with.
Oh my god. Yeah.
I will say after, the brother is killed with the suit, we get a fantastic action sequence. We should say the whole 15-20 minutes in the prison to the house.
escape.
The
Yeah.
third act of this movie
Is
rocks.
awesome.
It fucking rocks.
The effects and the action are just great.
Like we get like full on prototype stuff with like the rotating camera, like
Upgrade?
Upgrade. So yeah, we get full on like upgrade shots with the rotating camera and all of it. Thank you.
After that point, I will say one of my only gripes is I feel like it gets a little convoluted with finding him in the basement and
little bit,
stuff.
yeah.
His Lee Winnell's saw flourishes show a little bit, and that I will say
Twists.
But it's better
mind
done.
it. I don't mind it too much because we get the justice in the end.
Yeah.
which I feel like is earned in some
Totally.
respects.
But I do like that they never actually have Adrian admit that he was the one who was doing it all along. Elizabeth Moss is certain of it. She's been driven to this point. She knows. And she's like trying to get him to admit it, but he doesn't. And he still seems sinister enough that we can be like, oh yeah, he was doing it all along.
Also, it's his voice when he talks in those scenes.
And there's an implicit admission with him saying surprise.
Yes, sure. But I think it's still the fact that they never explicitly say it is still like just ambiguous enough to say like, was she really like, did this whole thing drive her mad? Was it the brother all along? I think that obviously it was Adrian, but I think
Regardless, what I love about that too is like, regardless whether like it was or wasn't Adrian, like let's say that like the scenario where the brother like hid Adrian away in the basement and did all this stuff was the case, even then, he would still deserve to die. Like,
totally.
Like he would
Yeah.
still deserve to be axed there, which is great.
It didn't change the fact that he was an abuser all along.
Well,
so,
and
like,
I read it as him gaslighting to the end, and she was giving him a chance.
Oh, that's
to,
what it was. I think that's what
be
it was.
honest and ask for forgiveness, and he just refused to admit any wrongdoing, which is very current.
Yeah.
Look at fucking Harvey Weinstein. Faking a walker and shit.
yeah, trying
until
to
the
make himself
end,
seem pathetic so he seems more innocent.
Yeah, and I think that is a very earned form of empowerment right there, you know?
How about this movie coming out like right when Weinstein is convicted?
Perfect timing, right?
Honestly, yeah.
That's my whole point about like the ambiguity being just enough to make it feel like the film might be gaslighting you. And that's what I like about it. Like it gives you enough that you can feel certain of Adrian's guilt, but there's still just enough ambiguity that's like, maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm not. And I think that was really nice. Did y'all catch the very nice foreshadowing that the brother was the one in the suit at the end scene in the house when she kills him? She in the prison, when he admits that he was in on it, she calls him a jellyfish. She says you're like you're like
Spineless.
Adrian but spineless. And then when he goes to the house to kill Sydney, the daughter, she's wearing a shirt with a big jellyfish on it.
Yeah, I did notice that. Yeah.
She's wearing a shirt with a big jellyfish
what a
on
good
it.
touch. What a good
And
touch.
so then like when Elizabeth Moss like shoots him and pulls off the mask and surprise it was the brother all along, it's like, the jellyfish gave it away. I loved
Cool.
that.
Nice. That's a good touch. One last little thing for me. There's so many sequences where when Elizabeth Moss is first making decisions, I feel like they're bad decisions, but the more I've reflected on them, like the better I feel about them. The biggest one, of course, being her getting the suit, the dog barking, revealing that Adrian is
in
back,
the house, yeah.
is in the house, which is well done. And her not putting it on. In the heat of the moment, I was thinking like, no, just put on the suit. But I was also thinking like, you can't out invisible the invisible man. Like hiding it away is like for evidence for later. She's not going to be able to get out with it. It was actually the smartest thing she could have done.
I mean, it was a fantastic setup for when she kills him at the end because she left it in a place where she could find it.
Right, but it wasn't just a good setup because of the plot. It also made sense for character motivation.
Totally.
And that it's so rare to get both, especially in movies about invisible men in super suits. Like,
Well, that's another benefit of it being a suit rather than a serum because there are multiple suits.
Yes.
So there is she can have that suit hidden away, and there's also the ambiguity about like, did the brother have his own suit or did Adrian change with him, like, and give him the suit? And also just like the fucking fight scene in the hospital where like she stabs him with the pen, so like the suit is like partially
glitching out. It looks so
he's
cool.
like,
It's really
he's like
great.
partially visible and then invisible. Like that shit was so fucking cool.
Yeah, that was the right way to do it. Like really
yeah.
well handled. So you can like see him occasionally, and you can start like placing his movements. It feels almost like a like
course
the
you
old
got-
like the cool like Nightcrawler scenes in the X-Men movies where he keeps like teleporting in and out of places.
Yeah.
So we can like see him for a moment and then like disappear. And like you get a vibe too that the suit gives you super strength because like the audio is so ramped up whenever he slams people, and it's so well executed. But I absolutely love how the cameras are designed to look so much like eyes that when they start like clicking in and out and they start like kind of undulating, when they contract, like they really feel like eyes or like on a device. And how perfect, for like an invisible, a person who's like always like watching, like to have like his whole like bodysuit covered in these like weird like camera
Yeah.
eyes. Oh, it's so like Lovecraftian almost. I love it.
I was so glad to see that they did a part where she like fought him in the rain so she could like see him because of the water. Like I thought that was,
And it's quick and it's well done.
that's been done to death. Like that's like a whole part of Hollow Man.
Which is why they don't overdo it.
But I loved it. I like it. I think it's cool. Track the invisible man by getting him out in the rain so you can like see his silhouette.
And the way like
Those
she
effects
GTAs
were
that guy's
really
car
good.
on the
Yeah.
way back. Yeah, they just nailed it. They nailed so much. You get so many wonderful moments of levity too, like for as dark and as thematic as this is. Like the first act has several, like a good 3 or 4 sequences where Cecilia and James and Sydney and even Emily like are all like just being like kind and a family. Like we
Right,
get
for the
these
brief period of time where they think that Adrian is actually dead and that she might actually be free.
They give us enough time to relate with those
All
characters.
the characters are likable.
And they're lovable. They're all like people you can relate to and enjoy, and you actually worry for. When Sydney gets struck, like I was mortified. Like,
Oh yeah.
that was horrifying. I think that's it for me.
Cool. Do you
adored
guys want to rate this?
Yeah, I'm ready.
I'll start with this one. This was shockingly good.
Yeah.
I went into it expecting to have fun, but I honestly wasn't expecting much more than like mediocre. But like, holy shit, I really liked this movie. Like the part where she actually gets Emily to agree to meet her in the restaurant, and the knife appears out of nowhere and just like slits Emily's throat,
And it gets slammed into her hand.
Slammed into her hand.
Yeah.
And like I fucking gasped at that point. Like I brought my hand to my mouth. That caught me so by surprise. And there are like multiple moments in the movie where I had that same kind of reaction. Like, fuck, man. If you had told me back in 2003 that Lee Whannell would be like maybe one of the best like horror writers and directors of like the late 2010s, I would have said you were fucking crazy. It's a 4.5 for me. This is a fucking fantastic movie.
Yeah, this movie's impressed me so much. You know, I wasn't sure what to expect, especially with the trailers being kind of campy and leaning into some of the bigger moments. But it's so mature, especially for Lee Winnell going off of Upgrade. Elizabeth Moss gives an amazing performance.
Everybody
and
does,
I
yeah.
just
sure.
think this was an incredible movie. I am gonna give it a 5. Actually,
Holy
I thought
shit.
it was amazing. Definitely worth checking out. I might see it again in theaters, honestly.
Ditto that. 5 from me. No movie's perfect. This one's perfect for me. I would gladly watch it again and will, and I'm going to be recommending it to all my friends also. I adore this film.
Y'all realize that y'all both rated this higher than The Lodge.
Yeah.
That's surprising.
Yeah,
to me.
I thought I had liked this movie a little bit more than The Lodge.
Wow.
And in my rating for The Lodge, I also preface by saying that like The Lodge is a very justifiable 5. It just for me hit me very personally, and like I couldn't.
Yeah,
do it, but,
I mean, no,
like,
it's totally fair. No, this
yeah.
is great. Like, this is the best movie I've seen this year, other than The Lodge.
I think that The
it's
Lodge.
close.
I'm glad you brought it up because like I think that The Lodge is like a better film. But man, this film's so much fun. This is a great movie.
I think this is a better film, personally.
I
for the three.
loved it. It was so much fun.
Well, we don't have official results for this one yet.
We'll do that next
My
week.
fingers are crossed that it's high.
We do have preliminary Rotten Tomatoes. Last time,
Let's just
We can
wait.
cover on the next one.
It's opening night. I'd say let's just wait. Let's give it its opening weekend before we do.
I
any
will say
results.
critics are loving this
Yeah,
movie.
I saw that too, and I'm happy about that. So shit for the new Invisible Man, that's a 4.8 out of 5 pods on average. Next week it's my choice, which I didn't realize until we were leaving the theater. So I have narrowed it down to 2 films. So I'm gonna fucking flip a coin.
Oh, nice.
I'm gonna flip a coin.
All right.
Cleveland, call it.
Heads.
All right. It is Tails. So we're gonna do The Descent.
Oh,
Excellent.
fun! I haven't seen that since. Oh wow, I must have been in like 8th grade, 9th grade. Like I was a tyke.
I've seen The Descent
Wee lad.
many times, and it's one of my favorite horror movies of all time.
Fun.
Yeah, next week we'll be talking about The Descent.
Nice. Get your birthday candles ready.
Yeah, right. Cleveland, who's our sponsor this week?
This week is brought to you by a wonderful sponsor. Tired of invisible armies trying to take over the invisible world and rule from their invisible towers of invisible madness? Fear no more. Now with Mr. Invisible's Invisible Guns. Having a problem with an invisible man? Just get an invisible gun. Problem solved.
It takes an invisible bullet to kill an invisible man. Thanks, Mr. Invisibles.
You can't hear it because it's an invisible. You're welcome.
But not inaudible.
I guess both.
The Inaudible Man.
Yeah.
That's the sequel we need.
You can see him, but you can't hear him. So terrifying. Okay, well, that's it for this week. If you like the podcast, go on to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating and a nice review, all of that good shit. Follow us on Twitter at PodPeoplePod and on letterboxd.com/PodPeoplePod for a list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and links to those corresponding episodes. Follow me on Twitter at Deep State Ozzy.
I'm at Mr. Sheets.
And I'm occasionally tweeting for Light Arc Studio as we further our progress on It Stares Back. Go on Steam, check it out. We're in early access. It'll never be a better time to get it.
It's not an invisible game.
It's not. It's real. You can play it. It's there.
The fun is visible.
It is. Guaranteed.
All right, well, tune in next week. We're going to be talking about The Descent. Yeehaw! And always remember that if you can't see me, then throw some paint on me.
I hold you tight and use my gaslight. Baby, talk to me. You've been acting strange. I can see in your eye that there's something wrong. And checks are all crazy. I'm not surprised, 'cause I've seen it before. Don't go lying now, baby, your dates are all hazy. Hear me out, I'm a nice guy. In the night, use my gaslight.